So good morning. First, I really like to thank the youth, Beaver, and the organizer to invite me. It's the first time I am in this conference site, and I heard about it for years, and I understand why. It's really amazing. Okay, so I will just give you an introduction to superconductivity, and I also try to give you some updates because, as I said, it's really lively subject topics at the moment. So for my affiliation, now I have two affiliations. I'm still in Paris in MPQ, Paris 7, and I will move to the Nail Institute in Grenoble very soon. Okay. Yeah. So the story starts at the beginning of the 20th century with this guy, Kamalin Holz, who was obsessed by cooling everything. So, and at that time, the way they chose is to liquefy some gas. And the last gas which was not liquefied was helium-4. And with a big group of engineers and researchers, they succeeded, and also big machine, you see the lab here, they succeeded to liquefy helium-4 in 98. And then the question was how we can use it. And at that time, the scientific wonder what happened to metals at very low temperature. Is the resistivity goes to zero? Does it goes to infinity because the electrons are frozen, or does it just goes to a constant value? And so they try to measure resistivity of many metals, including mercury. Why mercury? Because it's a liquid at ambient temperature, so it's very easy to make it very clean. And so finally, they succeeded to cool down it, and in 1911, they measure mercury. They say resistivity is almost zero. So this is the lab book from that time, and it's written by the hand of Kamalin Holz. So what they measure, this is the measurement. So you see the electric resistance, temperature, and the 3 points here, and suddenly a drop to almost zero with a very good accuracy here. So finally they made two discoveries. They discovered superconductivity, that they call supraconductivity at that time, and they also discovered, certainly before, superfluidity of helium-4, because when you pump on helium-4, they saw that you don't have any more bubbles, you don't have any more boiling, and this is in fact superfluid helium-4. So thanks to that, Kamalin Holz won a Nobel Prize in 1913. And you will see that here this is extracted from the Nobel Prize website, and superconductivity is not mentioned at that time. Just they mention that among other, they study metal at low temperature. So this was 1910, and then 20 years later, another property of superconductivity was discovered by Meissner and Rauschenfeld. And I want to show you just a little video, because for me this is the most impressive experiment you can show to students, just very simply with a liquid nitrogen and some magnet and a piece of superconductor. Okay, so this is superconductor, and on top of that this is a magnet. And you pour liquid nitrogen because we discover new materials, and then we see suddenly, so the magnet just starts to levitate. And this is exactly the Meissner effect. So when you apply a magnetic field, the magnetization of a superconductor will be exactly opposite to what you apply. So to keep the magnetic field inside the superconductor exactly to zero. can wonder about the connection between the first discovery by chameleons, resistivity is equal to 0, and this discovery. And I will show you that it's not exactly the same. One does not imply the other. Because if you have an ideal conductor, resistivity is equal to 0, then from the Maxwell equation, you got that. So it means that the magnetic field has to be kept constant. So when you cool down an ideal conductor and you apply magnetic field before that, then when it becomes superconductor, or an ideal conductor, the magnetic field will be kept constant inside. So there will be magnetic field inside the materials. But for superconductor, even if you apply magnetic field before it becomes superconductor, the magnetic field is expulsed from the inside of the superconductor. So one does not imply the other. So it's really a new properties of this kind of materials. So what about the thermodynamic properties? So here I will show you that there is a gap in the excitation of this kind of material, gap for the electrons, for the quasi-particle. So here you can see the specific heat versus temperature of nobium. So it's superconductor at about 9 Kelvin. And first look at this curve. This is the normal state of nobium. So you just apply magnetic field and you get back to the normal state. So if you remove the phonon contribution, you get something which is proportional to the temperature. But if you look now at the superconducting state, you see that exactly at Tc, the superconducting transition, you have a large jump. And then you have this behavior which is exponential of a gap divided by temperature, which is the evidence of the energy gap between the ground state of a superconducting state and the first excited state. So you keep in mind that there is a gap somewhere in this compound. And what about properties under magnetic field? Superconductivity is destroyed by magnetic field. So here you have a scheme of a phase diagram. You apply magnetic field, and this is the critical field, Hc. And you have this lag. So here transition is second order, and here it's first order. And there's a connection between this magnetic field with the so-called condensation energy. So it's energy you gain by becoming superconductor. And it's also, superconductivity is also destroyed by a critical current, which is connected to the Hc. So how to probe superconductivity? There are many ways to probe it. The first one, of course, is to measure the resistivity. So you need to measure with a 4-point technique to get rid of the resistivity of the contact. You can measure specific heat, of course, and you can measure magnetic susceptibility. This is a very new example I will present later. And you have two ways to measure it. Either you field cooled, so you as I show in the movie, so you apply magnetic field and you cool down, or either you cool with zero magnetic field. So here it's really impressive because you get exactly the same result, perfect diamagnetism in both cases. So what about more recent technique? You can measure STM, for instance. So here you see that at small voltage there is no excitation, and then you get some peak here, coherence peak, and some excitation. Then the difference between both is related to this gap you can see in specific heat. You can also measure R-press. And here you have a dispersion of the electronic band. Here it's a calculation. And again, you see here that you can get back to this gap. And there are plenty of other kind of measurement like thermal conductivity. And you can also do specific heat, thermal conductivity depending on the angle, and etc. So there are plenty of ways to prove it. Okay, so superconductivity is really not a very rare phenomenon. Here you have a periodic table, and all the yellow ones are superconductor at ambient pressure, sometimes at very low temperature. And all the green ones are become superconductor under high pressure. So you see that it's 53 elements which are superconductor, either at zero pressure and under pressure. And you notice here, which is, this was said by Marie Curie, you notice here that the very good conductor, you know, like copper, gold, and silver, they are not superconductor. So it's quite surprising, but we could think that good conductor becomes superconductor, but it's not the case. Okay, what about, I will start to present some theory. The Ginzburg-Landau theory first, which is the phenomenological one, and then I will move to a microscopic theory to explain what's really going on for the electrons inside the superconductor. So the first one, I think it starts in the 30s. It was based on the theory of Landau for phase transition, and so we knew that it's a second order phase transition, but so then the order parameter of the superconducting state will smoothly go from 0 above Tc and then will increase slowly inside the superconducting state. So the order parameter was chosen to be a complex number because of they think about it like a microscopic wave function of a superconducting state. And they did the development of free energy, a very simple one, it's a Taylor expansion. And you keep the even power, and you take B positive, and A change sign at the superconducting transition. So then you get this scheme for this is the free energy in the space of the order parameter, complex order parameter. So above Tc, you have this shape, and the ground state is here. So the order parameter is 0. And then you cross Tc, you get this Mexican hat potential. And then the new 0 is around here. Okay, so you can be anywhere here, but it's finite. So what is, I will already give you some idea about what is the meaning of this, so of the order parameter. After that, Gorkov made a connection between this theory and the microscopic theory, and from when we know that this order parameter is the density of states of a Cooper pair, which are the building block of the superconducting state. So then, when you cross Tc, the system chooses one particular value of the phase. And this phase is constant in the whole system. We said that the superconducting state breaks spontaneously the gauge symmetry, which is also U1 for those who like theory. So now we develop a little bit the Ginzburg-Landau theory, taking into account the possibility that the system is not homogeneous, and also that you can apply magnetic field. So you get this, I won't go into detail, but you recognize the first term I just showed you. Here you have the gradient term and the vector potential A and the energy from the magnetic field. So what can we get from that? We can get information about the length scale in the superconducting state. So think about an interface between a normal state and a superconducting state. And this is just space. Okay. So then you remove the magnetic field, but you keep the gradient term. And then you get this length, which is the Ginzburg-Landau coherence length, and which show you that the superconducting state is completely recovered inside the bulk of the superconductor on this length scale. And this is also the size of a Cooper pair. Typically, this is like between 50 and 500 nanometers, roughly. And there is a second length scale, which is the penetration depth. Here you apply magnetic field only, and you get this is the supercurrent of superconducting electron. You see that here you have 2e, which but we will see this is related to the existence of a Cooper pair. 2 electrons are together. And when you take that, so G is proportional to A, and this is the same as the London equation, which is the previous model. And you apply the Maxwell equation, and very easily you get that. The magnetic field exponentially decrease inside the superconductor on this length scale lambda. So then you have two kinds of superconductor, depending on the ratio between C and lambda. If lambda is smaller than C, then you have a type 1 superconductor. It means that you don't gain energy by making interface. But if you have lambda larger than C, every interface will provide a new gain of energy. It provides negative enthalpy to the system. Then in this kind of superconductor, when you apply magnetic field, the system wants to make as much as possible interface between normal state and superconducting states. And how it does that, it lets some magnetic field going inside the superconductor, and this magnetic field is made by what we call vortex. And inside the vortex it's a normal state, and outside it's superconducting state. Then you have this interface and you get a lot of energy. And these vortexes, they see each other. It makes a kind of crystals, a lattice. And then you get a very nice lattice of vortices when you apply magnetic field above HC1. So for comparison, HC1 is smaller than the thermodynamic magnetic field we saw just before. So in fact, there are a lot of superconductors which are type 2, and the study of the vortex lattice is also a field in superconductivity, because you can get lattice, you can get also liquid of vortexes, and the shape of the lattice of vortexes give you information about the superconducting state, about the shape of the order parameter. So it's a very lively field also. From this equation, you also get a very important property of superconductor, which is the flux quantization. So imagine you are inside a superconductor, deep inside, and you go around this loop. Then if you take this, you derive this, and you get the superconducting current. So you see that, again, you have a Cooper pair, you have a density of Cooper pair, and here you have the phase of the order parameter, and the A vector. So because you are inside the superconductor, because of the Meissner effect, this has to be 0. GS inside is 0. So if you go around here, for the phase, you have to be proportional to 2 pi to get back to the same value. And if you get a loop of A, you just get the flux. So it means that the flux inside this loop has to be a quantified number of a quantum flux P0. And this is exactly the flux you find inside the vortex, for instance. And this also gives you property which are useful for the squid. So a squid is a very sensitive probe of magnetic field, and it's made by a loop of superconductor. It gives you also the little part effect. Okay. So now this is we understood the main property, but why does it become superconductor? So this was proposed 20 years later, after the discovery of Meissner effect in 1956 by Barden, Cooper, and Schiffer. And the first idea was that we have an energy gap. And so the electrons are bound inside the system, and they thought that superconductivity is a condensation of boson. But inside a superconductor you have electron, and electron is a fermion. So to make a boson, you have to take 2 electrons. So the idea was simply that you take this, this is a Fermi surface, you fill it gradually with a wave function of the electron, and you add 2 electrons here and here with opposite momentum and opposite spin. and you plug a very small attraction between these two electrons. And they calculate that this forms a bond state. The energy of the system is lower than without the two electrons. So then they conclude that the Fermi liquid is unstable to the pairing of this electron. And then, as I said, we see that the building block of superconductivity is this Cooper pair, two electrons with opposite spin and opposite momentum. So this is a simple idea from Cooper mainly, and after that we realize also that you really need the whole Fermi surface. It's not a two-body problem, it's really a many-body problem with all the Fermi surface to really get this instability. So okay, now we said we plug this interaction, but we can also do a more precise calculation of the effect of this interaction. So they use a simplified model with an interaction which is zero inside the Fermi surface and which is finite on this above this sphere with thickness of omega d. And we will see later that omega d in the BCS model is related to the energy of the phonon. And then you can calculate that. You get the gap that we saw in supersplit, which is proportional to the energy of this pairing mechanism, and which is related to the density of state at the Fermi level and the interaction here. And this gives you rise to a bond state even if V is very small. So then now I show you the BCS bond state with a whole electron. So how do you build it? So this is second quantization, and here you create one electron with minus k and spin down, and here you create one electron with k and spin up. And you start from the empty state, and you make like that a lot of Cooper pair. And so with this parameter, Vk and Uk, so Vk is the probability that this pair is occupied, and Uk is the probability that it's not occupied. And this is, you see that this is a product. So the wave function of the BCS state is a product. So it means that the number of Cooper pair is not fixed. So it can look very strange, like you have a system where the number of electrons is not fixed. And of course, it's not possible if you have a completely isolated system. But in general, when the superconductor is in contact with many other systems, and the number of electrons can be not fixed. So just from the quantum aspect, the number and the phase are conjugate variables, and because we know that the system chooses a particular phase, we are not surprised that the number of Cooper pair is not fixed. So there are also a topic in superconductivities to study the case where a superconductor is completely isolated, which is called, they made a very small box of Cooper pair, and then the phase is not fixed again. So when you take this and you do a Bogoliubov transformation and so on, a lot of calculation, then you can get the spectrum of excitation. And you get this, so this is the density versus energy, this is the Fermi level, and you open a gap around this Fermi level, which is the one we saw in specific heat, in STM and in RPS. Okay, so we know that the Fermi surface is unstable to some attraction, but what is this attraction? So in the 50s, two groups, they measure the superconducting transition for different isotopes of mercury. So then you change the mass of the atom, and then you change the energy of the phonon inside the system. And they got this nice result, but the superconducting transition is inversely proportional to m to the, sorry, I don't know how to say it in English. Okay.
Square.
Okay. Okay. So then, from that, they knew that the mechanism is has something to do with the mass of the ions and to the energy of the phonon. So the attractive interaction, we know that there is a role of phonon is very important. So I will try to show you. This is, it's an illustration, okay? So then, but you have here the atoms. Whoops, sorry. So you have the atoms and the electron. So the idea is that the electron goes through the ions, make it make a positive charge. And because the ions are slower than the electrons, it's a question of retardation, then the second electron will be attracted by this positive space inside the system. And okay, so now we can go a little bit further. And in fact, the superconductivity arises thanks to the exchange of a virtual boson. So boson, phonon is a boson, of course, and so the mechanism I just explained also corresponds to this point of view. And I like very much this point of view of Abrikosov that you can find in this book. And he said, let's take two electrons, one electron and one transmitting system A. Okay. Then the first electron will interact with this system and will make it excited, A star. Then the second electron will interact with the excited system and will also get back the transmitting system to the ground state, but will also change its energy and momentum. And he said that simply taken this process, you get this transition, energy of a transition, superconducting transition, which is related to the difference of energy between A and A star, and related to lambda, which is the interaction of the electron with system A. So this is a general point of view, and of course the exchange of virtual phonon also belongs to this scheme, but you can have many, many variants. So for instance, you can exchange paramagnon, which are fluctuation of a magnetic phase, and this is possibly the case in the cuprate, in the heavy fermion, in the iron-based superconductor. You can exchange fluctuation of valence. So for instance, it might be the case in this heavy fermion compound. You can exchange fluctuation of quadrupolar phase. You can exchange exciton. You can exchange plasmon. So we can think, virtually we can think about any kind of process that will give you rise to superconductivity. And then if you think about this kind of process, you may have a different kind of superconductor, which are called unconventional superconductor. So this superconductor, at the transition, they bring another symmetry than the gauge symmetry. So mainly they bring the symmetry of the Fermi surface. So then you get an anisotropic gap. So the gap is not anymore just a sphere. It's not a square, but it can have different kind of shape. So how does it happen? I will really just summarize the results here. You get interaction, so it's U there, but it's the same as V, and it depends on the momentum of the two electrons, K and K1, K2, or K prime, and it depends on the angle between K and K prime. Then you develop this interaction on the usual function, PL, and then you get the superconducting gap here related to this term here, and the lowest value of U, of V, give you the highest TC, and this will be the L chosen by the system to become superconductor. So you can have L equal to 1 for S wave, but you can also have L equal to 2, so then we call it a P wave, and L equal to 3, it's a D wave, etc. And this gives you a very interesting property. You see here an example. This is an example extracted from a cuprate. Here you have a D wave with this symmetry gap. So you have a Fermi surface, and the superconducting gap is not widely open, but it has this symmetry and change sign here, plus, minus. If you change sign, you have to be 0 here. So 0 is it's not accidental 0. It's really by changing sign, you have to be 0. So then you have node here in the excitation, and it means that at all these 4 points, you can have excitation of very low energy. So you don't have this full gap to recover to get an excitation. So it will change the temperature dependence of the specific heat, for instance. So for another example, this transfer multi-node system with oxide is thought to be a P-wave state. Okay, what time is it? Whoops, okay. Okay. So I told you there are plenty of superconductors, and there is an update I want to tell you about this bismuth. So you see in this periodic table, you have bismuth, which is superconductor above 9 GPa. But very recently, I think it was like less than 1 year ago, bismuth was discovered to be superconductor at ambient pressure at very, very low temperature. So you see it's microkelvin. So just technically it's very difficult to do that. So they have very good dilution fridge, which can first go at 5 millikelvin. And on top of that, you have a second stage which is a demagnetization state. And thanks to that, if you apply a very large magnetic field to this second stage, and then you wait like 3 days, then they succeeded to get 0.1 millikelvin. So it's quite amazing experiment. And they measure that. So this is bismuth, and this is the measure of susceptibility. So this is a measure of Meissner effect. And they also measure the critical current, critical field, sorry, of this compound. So it's microtesla. So it means that if you apply 5 microtesla, the system is not superconductor anymore. And if you remember, the magnetic field of Earth is 30 microtesla. So they have to do shielding. So it was a very difficult experiment. So why this compound is interesting? It's interesting because the Fermi energy is very small, like 25 millieV. It's extremely small. But in the BCS theory, you need that the energy of the phonon is much smaller than the Fermi energy. So this is not the case here. So the BCS theory cannot be applied to this system. And also, it's related, of course, the density of carrier is very small. You see, it's much smaller than the usual metal, which is 10 to the power 22. So you see here, if you have very small density and very small, then it's very difficult to get a TC which is not very, very near 0. So for this compound, the theory is still to be found to explain why it's superconductor. Then I'm happy to show you the superconductivity in this compound that maybe 80% of you studied, some related. And so the STO compound is very similar to bismuth. So it's superconductor below 80 millikelvin. It also has very low carrier density and even smaller Fermi energy. So it's really difficult to explain why it becomes superconductor. So just for your information, this carrier density corresponds to the removal of one oxygen out of 10 to the power 5 of oxygen. So it's very, very diluted superconductor. And compared to bismuth, this compound also has a single valley. So it just has one sheet of Fermi surface. And so the mechanism which has been proposed for bismuth, which is an exchange of phonon between different valleys, does not hold. So the author, they suggest that the mechanism is the exchange of plasmon, which is also a boson, as you remember this very general scheme. Okay, so here it's a diagram of TC of the superconductor which were found during the last 100 years. So you have mercury, of course, by Kerr-Melin Onnes. And then we increase slightly the temperature, but not so much. And then suddenly, in the 80s, we discover cuprates. So cuprates, because they are based on the copper. And then TC increased quite a lot. It was very surprising, still surprising. And then in the 2008, I think, we discovered a new family which is based on iron. This was surprising also because we thought, maybe at that time, that superconductivity and magnetism, they don't like each other. So, but they really coexist in this compound. And then very recently, I will tell you about that, the high pressure superconductor based on very simple elements like hydrogen. So there's all these compounds here. They are thought to be unconventional superconductor, as I told you, with this node in the superconducting gap. And a little bit of history about this compound. The first one, which is thought to be unconventional, is this one. So it's based on rare earth atom, cerium here. And this one has a very low TC, but also a very low Fermi energy. So somehow it's in the same ratio of scale of energy. And it was discovered in '79 with a very small TC, but also an interesting property that the fermion, the electron inside this compound, have a very, very heavy mass. And like 100 or 1,000 more times the free electron mass. So, and they also have magnetism. So it was already a first surprise. Maybe 7 years later, cuprates were discovered, and I show you here some example. What you have to remember is that the most important ingredient is this square of copper and oxygen that gives a very nice ground plate for tertiary. And so Bernoss and Müller, who discovered the cuprates, they won the Nobel Prize maybe 1 year later after their discovery. And all these compounds, they are beyond the BCS model. So there are plenty of these compounds, and for all of them, superconductivity is not alone. You always have a competing and or coexisting order. So for instance, this heavy fermion family, it's always temperature versus pressure or chemical doping. You have magnetism and superconductivity, they coexist. This new compound based on iron, also you have antiferromagnetism, but also a structural transition here, coexisting with superconductivity. This old-fashioned compound dichalcogenide, you have charge density wave coexist, or charge order coexisting with superconductivity. And of course the cuprates that will be more widely presented tomorrow by Jacobo. You have antiferromagnetic state, this very strange state which is called pseudo gap, which is a kind of crossover, and coexisting with superconductivity, and very recently also they found the charge order phase here, charge density phase. So the fact that you have this phase together with superconductivity can be entered in this equation and then you can explain why they are all unconventional. So here is a list of all the possible coexisting and competing order you can find. There is also multipolar order and hidden order, which just means that we don't know what it is. So it's, and as I said, for all of them, or for almost all of them, we think that they are all unconventional superconductors. And of course, the symmetry of the gap you can find gives you information about the pairing mechanism, which is at play in the compound. Okay, so now I have time to discuss this new family of superconductors. So it's not so new because at least in the 60s, Ashcroft he predicted that hydrogen will be metallic and maybe a superconductor at ambient temperature. So what was his idea? Is that so it's a phonon mechanism, but because the elements of hydrogen is very light, the energy of the phonon is very, very important. And you remember this equation, so it's written in a little bit different way, but here you have h bar omega d, and this is the density of state at the Fermi level and the interaction. And so if you have h bar omega d, which is related to the Debye temperature, then you can expect a very large Tc. So he made a very deep calculation of the interaction here, and he found that it has to be higher at 0.25. He said it's underestimated because you have to take into account the unclapped process. But finally, when you do the calculation, you find Tc about 60 Kelvin. So quite easily we can think that just by taking into account new mechanism, you can, if you get like 0.4, I think you get the room temperature for superconductivity. So what are the ingredients? A high frequency phonon, so a light mass of the element. You need a strong electron phonon coupling and a high density of states. So to get high density of states, as he explained, one way is to apply very, very high pressure. And then you get high critical temperature. So these are very, very difficult experiments. And so we can wonder why it's interesting, because they think that it can be a metastable state as diamond. So it's possible that you grow the crystals and then you relieve the pressure, the crystal is still there and you can use it. So it's interesting that he made a connection with astrophysics, because he said that in Jupiter you have a lot of hydrogen and also magnetic field, and he said that maybe there is supercurrent inside Jupiter. So he made a connection with something we at first we don't think about. Okay, so very, very recently, 2 years, just 2 years ago, was discovered by, I know Aramet because he wrote a book on high pressure, so it's like my Bible on my desk. And he discovered, he said, conventional superconductivity, so mediated by phonon, at 203 Kelvin in this compound. So they put together hydrogen and sulfur, and they apply very high pressure. So here I show you the measurement of Meissner effect. And they see here you have this Meissner effect, which starts at about 200 Kelvin. And this pressure is 155 GPa. So it's very huge. So they use diamond anvil cell for that, and very, very small cullet, like it's maybe about 30 micrometer. And the thickness of the sample is between 3 and 5 micrometers. It's extremely difficult measurement. And they were also able to measure resistivity under this high pressure. So here you have an insulating layer, and they sputter some, in fact it's not platinum, I don't know. They say it's a titanium connection. And they were succeeded to measure resistivity by a four-point technique. And also to apply magnetic field to see if zero resistivity is removed by the application of magnetic field. And they also check the isotope effect. So they used this compound and keep sulfur but change hydrogen to deuterium. And they see a shift of Tc, which is expected. Deuterium is heavier than hydrogen, so Tc is a little bit smaller. And they don't get exactly this ratio, but the effect is there. So it's evidence that it's phonon-mediated superconductivity. So what are the updates? This nice paper which they combine X-ray measurement to check the structure and resistivity measurement. And so they confirmed the first idea, which was that this gas under high pressure, you finally get sulfur alone and hydrogen-free sulfur, which is expected to be a BCC lattice. And more recently, they also checked the Messner effect using a very different technique. So this is the gas, so this is the diamond, and here you have the hydrogen sulfur. And inside they put a very small foil of tin, and they measure somehow the splitting of the nuclear energy level of this tin, and which is of course related to the local magnetic field seen by the foil. And so depending on the temperature, when you cross the superconducting transition, your hydrogen sulfur will shield the magnetic field or will let it enter. So with a difference, you see the change of the splitting, and somehow you check the Messner effect. So what is the future? This very, very recent report, maybe it was in March, yeah, I think it was in March. So a group, they reported metallic hydrogen, which is of course the first step before superconductivity. So what they measure, they measure the reflectance of the system. So here you are at low pressure, and you have this transparent hydrogen tube, and then here you got this so-called black phase. So what you see, the ring here is the gasket, is the radium gasket, and this is the hydrogen. And then when they apply almost 500 GPa, they get some reflectivity. So it's the fun is that they took a picture with their iPhone and they tell it in the paper. So it doesn't look serious, but I think it's serious. And so for the proper measurement, they measure reflectance of the hydrogen and they measure reflectance of the gaskets. And clearly here, when you have reflectance, which is almost 0.9, you know that you have a metal. So they also evaluated the carrier density, which is as usual, so it's not a dilute superconductor, and they know that they have 1 electron per atom, which is has expected the so-called Wigner and Huntington phase with, so it's atomic 1 hydrogen, metallic hydrogen. So they say something interesting. They say, okay, it's metallic, we think it's metallic, but we don't say it's solid. Okay, it can be a liquid metal. So of course, what they have to do is maybe X-ray measurement or Raman scattering measurement. But they say it is difficult because if you use some light at this high pressure, there is a possibility that the diamond breaks. So it looks very, very difficult experiment. Okay, so I will keep that because I think maybe you might be interested by that. So it's superconductivity at the interface between STO and lanthanum and titanium or aluminium O3. So you made this heterostructure, and it is known that here you have a two-dimensional electronic gas, and superconductivity was found in this gas. So here you have measurement of resistance, and when you change the gate here, and you see that here when you remove electron, you have like insulator, and when you add electron, then you get this transition here, which is about 0.2 Kelvin. And here you have a phase diagram, and you have this transition between the insulator to a superconductor. So origin of superconductivity is not so clear. Maybe, probably there is a connection with what I showed you earlier, which is a superconductivity in a bulk STO at a very low density of electron. And what is interesting also is that because you have this 2D system, and you can expect effect of Rashba spin-orbit coupling. Okay, so if I have 2 more minutes, I want to show you what is the effect of this Rashba spin-orbit coupling on bulk compound. So for that, you need a compound without inversion symmetry center, which is the case, for instance, for this cyan platinum-free silicon. So you see, if you inverse the structure, you don't get the same. And this gives rise to this gradient of potential, and then to this spin-orbit coupling of Rashba type. So here you have momentum of electron, spin of electron, and this gradient. So if you apply that to a single electron, you get this energy. So here this is the usual Fermi kinetic energy on the Fermi surface, but you have this splitting which depends on the direction of the momentum on the spin. So what this gives you this Fermi surface. So this is a top view of the Fermi surface. Delta V is along Z, and you get this splitting of the spherical Fermi surface is split in 2 spheres, and depending on the orientation of the spin of the electron. So it has a very strong consequences on the superconducting state, because when you have a superconducting state, when I said it's a singlet state, it means that you need this 4 degenerate electron. But here you cannot do that. You see, these 2 they are splitted by a large energy, which is larger than the superconducting gas. So you cannot make this pairing. And so the splitting is like 500 Kelvin, 100 Kelvin, which is much, much larger than the superconducting gas. So then you can make a pair with, for instance, this one and this one. And if you write it, this is the copper pair you make. This is a mixing of the singlet, this one, singlet state, and the triplet state. Okay? So then you get this very strange copper pair, which is a mixture of singlet and triplet state. So possibly this is also relevant for the 2D electron gas structure. And this gives you also strong consequences on the critical field. So as I said, when you apply magnetic field, you destroy superconductivity. And there are 2 limitations of this critical field. The first one is the orbital limitation, which is a schematic here, so it's like a Lorentz force, or you fill the system with vortices. and it's related to the effective mass of the electron in the system. It's related to Xi, and Xi is related to the effective mass. And you also have a Pauli limitation. So Pauli limitation is that you have a Cooper pair, and because you have a spin flip, then you have a tendency to align the spin along H, and you break the Cooper pair. And so this limitation will not apply for this compound because if you apply magnetic field along the gradient of B, then the susceptibility is constant when you cross the transition. So there is no, this does not hold. You don't have Pauli limitation. And moreover, in this compound, you also have a very, very large effective mass. This belongs to the heavy fermion family, and the effective mass is extremely high at a quantum critical point. So just then, if you have this very large, the orbital limitation is also very high. And finally, you can apply extremely large magnetic field. Superconductivity will not be destroyed. So this is what we measure here. This is the critical field, and this is like tendency is now about 30 Tesla for very, very small superconducting transition. So usually the orbital limitation is here. And then, perfect timing, these are some references. So there's a quite recent book by Annette, Tinkham, of course, which is very famous. This is a more how to say, history of superconductivity, and the book by Abrikosov, we just passed away like 3 weeks ago, Fundamental Theory of Metal. This is very useful. It's a website where you can find a lot of video, and it's more for telling about physics to large audience, but it's very useful. And here in this note, you have a nice explanation of unconventional superconductivity. And thank you for your attention.